The red folder was too thin to hold $825,000, but the sentence inside it had my name where it did not belong. Rachel Kim slid the folder across the conference table without letting go. The paper rasped against the polished wood. Cold air from the ceiling vent brushed the back of my neck, and the room smelled faintly of burnt coffee and lemon cleaner. "Mr. Lawson," she said, "before I release these pages, I need you to understand what they are. This is not an accusation. Then why does it say I directed the company's financial decisions?" Rachel released the folder. My thumb caught on the sharp edge of the first page. Halfway down, one line had been marked for my attention. Certain financial decisions were directed by my father, Edward Lawson. I read it twice, then a third time. "My son wrote this?" "I didn't say that. You called me here." "I called because the draft was uploaded through borrower-side access, then deleted. Our system retained the event. Compliance flagged the language because you're the guarantor, and the statement assigns you an operating role." "I don't have an operating role." Rachel folded her hands. "That is what I need you to confirm." Less than an hour earlier, I had still been standing in my old workshop, trying to understand why my 35-year-old son had blocked my number. I'd called Nathan 3 times from my cell, straight to voicemail each time. On the 4th try, I used the landline mounted beside the pegboard. "Hello?" Nathan answered. On the 2nd ring, "Nate, what the hell is going on?" Silence. Not bad reception. Not a dropped call. I heard him breathe once. Then the line clicked dead. A minute later, my cell rang. The bank. Now I sat across from Rachel with a sentence in front of me that made a blocked phone number look almost childish. "When was this uploaded?" Rachel checked the page beside her. "June 10th. I knew the date without doing the math. Closing had been June 8th. 2 days after the loan funded? Yes. The first payment isn't even due yet. That's correct. I pushed the page away, then pulled it back. So, somebody was already explaining why the business failed before it failed. Rachel's expression barely moved. I can't characterize intent. What I can tell you is that the language raised a question about your involvement. My involvement was signing a guarantee. Then that is what you should state, after you've reviewed your documents. The distinction mattered to her. I could hear it in the way she clipped each sentence clean. Banker language. No guesses. No favors. At 60, after spending most of my adult life estimating commercial flooring jobs, I knew the value of saying exactly what a document could prove, and no more. A quarter-inch mist on a hotel corridor could ruin thousands of dollars in material. One careless sentence could do worse. Rachel turned another page toward me. 2 payments had gone out shortly after closing. One line caught my attention. Equipment modernization and transition services. The amount beside it was just over $100,000. I tapped it. What equipment? That's one of the items under review. For a flooring company? Rachel nodded once. I leaned closer. I owned one for almost 30 years. You can spend that kind of money on equipment, sure. Ride-on floor scrapers, grinders, dust systems, trucks. But modernization, consulting for that amount? Somebody better have redesigned the moon. For the first time, Rachel's mouth tightened as if she had almost smiled. Almost. The company Nathan bought had been called Vance Commercial Flooring. After closing, he planned to rename it Lawson Premier Floors. He'd loved the sound of that. Lawson on the trucks. Lawson on the invoices. Lawson on the building. My name. If stories about family betrayal, hidden money, and the price of revenge keep you listening, subscribe so you can hear more stories where the truth comes out piece by piece. Then come back to this table with me, because the paper in front of me was only getting stranger. 6 days before closing, Nathan had sat at my kitchen table with a blue pen between his fingers. "Dad, I'm not asking you for money. That's usually what people say right before they ask me for money." He'd managed a tired smile. "I need your signature, not your money." The acquisition loan was for $825,000. My personal guarantee was limited to $500,000. Nathan and Claire were putting money into the deal, and the business had existing contracts, crews, equipment, and years of sales history. I had sold my own company 4 years earlier. After taxes, retirement planning, and everything else, I was comfortable, but $500,000 was not pocket change. It was a chunk of my life with a dollar sign attached. "You've read all of this?" I asked him that afternoon. "Twice." "And Claire?" "She knows the numbers better than I do." That sounded reasonable. Claire handled books well enough that Nathan joked she could find a missing nickel in a snowbank. I reviewed the summary packet: revenue, cash flow, purchase price, loan terms. Nothing on those pages said I would manage the company. Nothing said I would choose vendors. Nathan nudged the pen toward me. "This gets me out from under everybody else. Dad, my own company." I signed. Back at the bank, the memory of that pen made my fingers curl against the table. "Rachel, am I allowed to see the whole borrower file?" "No." That answer came fast. "Good," I said. "At least one thing today makes sense." She gathered the pages into the red folder. "You're entitled to information related to your guarantee and to statements that directly concern your role. Other records have restrictions. I recommend you have counsel review what you signed before you make any additional representations." "Are you telling me not to pay?" "No, sir. I'm not giving you legal advice." "Not to call my son?" "That is also not my call." 80. Fair enough. I took out my phone and searched a name a retired contractor had given me 2 years earlier after a partnership dispute. "Laura Bennett, commercial litigation." Her assistant answered. I explained enough to get transferred. Laura's voice was low and quick. "Do you have the guarantee in front of you?" "Not the complete closing copy." "Get it. Don't sign anything else today. Don't confirm anyone else's version of events. Don't turn it into a fight before I know what documents exist." He blocked me. A short pause. "That may make the last part easier." I looked at Rachel. "Can I leave with copies of what I'm allowed to have?" "Yes." The printer started behind the glass wall, rollers clicking in a steady rhythm. While I waited, Rachel asked, "Did you ever approve vendors for your son?" "No." "Recommend any?" I gave him names of people I knew in the industry when he was first looking at the business. Recommendations, not approvals. "Did you direct payments?" "No." "Have access to the operating account?" "No." Each answer sounded simple. That bothered me, because someone had gone to the trouble of writing the opposite. The printer stopped. Rachel placed the permitted copies into a plain envelope, not the red folder, and handed it to me. "Your attorney can contact lender counsel regarding preservation and any formal requests." I stood. "Is the bank freezing anything?" "I can't discuss actions outside what concerns your guarantee." Another clean line. Outside, heat rolled off the parking lot and through the soles of my shoes. The bank door shut behind me with a soft hydraulic hiss. I had barely reached my truck when my phone buzzed. For half a second, I thought Nathan had unblocked me. It was the Lawson family group chat. Susan, my younger sister, had sent a question mark beneath a message from Nathan. "Dad is panicking and trying to interfere with the company. Please give us some space while we sort this out." I stopped beside the driver's door. Another message appeared. Nathan again. "Please don't respond to Dad if he calls about the business. Our lawyer says we need boundaries until this is sorted out." My hand stayed on the door handle. I hadn't called Susan. I hadn't called Claire. I hadn't told a single relative about the bank. Nathan had blocked me before I could ask what happened to the money. Then he had told the family not to listen before I could say a word. I opened the envelope Rachel had given me and looked again at the date on the deleted draft. June 10th, 4 days before Nathan blocked my number. He hadn't shut me out because I started asking questions. He had prepared for my questions before I knew there was anything to ask. By the time I got back to my workshop, I had stopped trying to guess why. Guessing was how you missed a bad estimate. I cleared a space on the scarred plywood table, pushed aside a box of old flooring samples, and laid out everything I was legally entitled to have. The wall fan clicked every third turn. Pencil dust stuck to the side of my hand as I wrote 6 dates across a yellow legal pad. June 2nd. Nathan asked me to guarantee the loan. June 8th. Closing. June 10th. The draft blaming me was uploaded. June 14th. Nathan blocked me. June 15th. The bank called. Then I added the first post-closing payment, listed in the credit summary Rachel had provided. Laura Bennett called while I was drawing a line beneath the dates. "Don't turn your kitchen table into a crime lab," she said. "It's a workshop table. That changes everything." Her dry tone lasted half a second. "Send me the guarantee, and only the lender documents you were given. Don't get cute with passwords, company accounts, or anything Nathan hasn't authorized you to access." "I know. Good. People who know usually need the reminder most." After we hung up, I opened the seller summary Nathan had emailed me before closing. Vance Commercial Flooring had shown annual revenue around $2,800,000. One hotel chain accounted for a little under 2/5 of that business. I remembered questioning it. "That's a lot of eggs in one basket," I'd told Nathan. He had tapped the page. "They've renewed for years." Now I compared that summary with the receivables information included in the guarantor package. The hotel chain was barely there. I checked again. Same result. A company responsible for more than $1 million of historical annual revenue had almost vanished from expected receivables. That wasn't a rounding error. I called Frank Delaney, who had managed commercial flooring projects around Kansas City for 25 years before retiring. We'd fought over schedules, adhesives, union crews, and once a shipment of porcelain tile that arrived 2 weeks late. "That was friendship in our business," Frank answered over the metallic clatter of something in his garage. "Ed Lawson. Either you need advice or somebody owes you money. Maybe both." I gave him the clean version. A flooring company changed hands. One customer had represented close to 2/5 of historical revenue, then seemed to disappear around closing. "Hotel chain?" Frank asked. "Yes. National or regional?" "Regional." He whistled softly. "Those contracts don't usually evaporate on Tuesday because somebody woke up cranky. Procurement cycles take time. If they weren't renewing, somebody likely knew before the ink dried." "How far before?" "Depends on the agreement. Weeks. Sometimes months." I rubbed the pencil eraser across the legal pad until a gray smear appeared. Frank's voice changed. "This Nathan's deal?" "I didn't say that. You didn't have to. Keep it that way. Always do." The call ended, but the question stayed on my table. If the hotel account was already leaving, when had Nathan learned? My phone rang again before I could write it down. "Claire." "Ed," she said, calm as a receptionist confirming an appointment. "I think we need to lower the temperature." "Which temperature is that?" "Nathan says, you're contacting people about the business. I called one old friend." A pause. "Barely there," Claire continued. "He's trying to keep the company steady. The kids are hearing enough already. Owen and Lily shouldn't hear anything about this." "I'm glad we agree." Her voice was smooth. No accusation. That made me listen harder. I asked, "Is the hotel chain still under contract?" Silence filled the line long enough for the fan behind me to click twice. Claire said, "Why are you asking me that?" "Because I guaranteed $500,000, based partly on revenue that included them." "Are you getting internal documents from the bank?" Not an answer. "I'm getting what I'm entitled to receive." "Ed, digging through Nathan's business while he's trying to stabilize it isn't going to help. Is the contract active?" "Nathan needs space." "Claire, I have to pick up Lily." The call ended. I wrote one word beside the hotel account. "Why?" Before calling Harold, I checked the public state filing for the company. The ownership change had posted. The new name had not yet replaced every old listing, which was ordinary after a closing. But seeing Lawson beside the registration still made me stop. Nathan had wanted that name badly. At my kitchen table, he had said, "Vance built a good shop. I'm going to make it ours." Ours. At the time, I took that word the way fathers do when a son is excited. Family pride. Continuity. Something he could hand to his own children one day. Now the word looked different on paper. My surname had helped him sell the deal to me. Yet the actual business records gave me no management rights at all. I was good enough to guarantee the debt, not good enough to see what had happened to the customer carrying so much of the revenue. I printed the filing and placed it beneath the seller summary. Not evidence of wrongdoing, just another boundary I needed to remember. The next name was already sitting in the purchase packet. Harold Vance. He had owned Vance Commercial Flooring for more than 30 years. 68, according to the sale biography Nathan had shown me, with plans to retire somewhere he could fish more than he worked. His number was still in the packet. Harold answered after 5 rings. Vance. Mr. Vance, this is Ed Lawson. The silence on his end had weight. I know who you are. I'm not asking you to violate an agreement. I need to understand something I was told before I guaranteed Nathan's loan. Harold exhaled through his nose. You need a lawyer talking to my lawyer. I have one. Then use her. I looked at the revenue summary. Did you know the hotel account was leaving before closing? I'm not discussing customer information with you. Did Nathan? Another pause. Harold lowered his voice. I asked Nathan whether his guarantor had seen the concentration issue. My pencil stopped. What concentration issue? You heard what I said. Harold, when did you ask him? I'm done, Ed. The line went dead. That was the first moment all afternoon when I stood up. The chair legs scraped concrete. Somewhere outside, the mower coughed to life, then settled into a steady drone. Concentration issue, not declining sales, not a surprise cancellation, a known risk important enough for the seller to ask whether I had seen it. I called Laura. She listened without interrupting. Don't call Harold again, she said. I wasn't planning to. I'll contact his counsel. If there are seller-side communications, he can lawfully authenticate or produce. We do it through the right channel. You think there's something there? I think he chose his words carefully. So did Claire. That matters less than documents. There it was. The difference between suspicion and something that could survive daylight. After the call, I went back through the email Nathan had forwarded before closing. The subject line read, Final numbers, dead. Attached were a sales summary, a purchase allocation, and a cash flow projection. No warning about customer concentration, no non-renewal notice. Nothing suggesting nearly 2/5 of the historical revenue had disappeared. I searched older messages on the desktop I still used for bookkeeping and archived business records. Nathan had sat at that same computer the week before closing, complaining that my QuickBooks version belonged in a museum. Move over, Dad, he'd said. You're making this painful to watch. I remembered going to the kitchen for coffee while he installed updates. The email search found nothing about the hotel chain. Then a folder labeled Security caught my eye. Most of it was junk, password notices, login confirmations, alerts I had ignored because I recognized the dates. One message had arrived the afternoon Nathan was at my house. New device signed in. I opened it. The alert listed my account, the time, and a browser I didn't normally use. It did not name Nathan. It did not prove who touched the keyboard. Laura's warning came back immediately, and I printed the notice without pretending it meant more than it did. Still, I set it beside the timeline. My phone buzzed. A text from Harold. Have your lawyer ask my lawyer about the due diligence dates, especially the week before you signed. I read it once, then forwarded it to Laura. On my legal pad, I circled June 2nd. The question was no longer whether Nathan's new company had run into trouble. It was how much trouble he already knew about when he put the pen in my hand. Laura called me before 9 the next morning. Harold's lawyer will meet with us, she said. Not at Harold's shop, their office. And understand this before we go. They are not opening their entire file to you. I'm not asking for that. You are, just in a more polite voice. I almost argued, then stopped. The old wall clock in my workshop ticked over the hum of the fan. What are they willing to show? Enough to answer one question, whether the seller disclosed the hotel account problem before closing. That was enough. Harold's attorney worked out of a brick office building in Overland Park, with a lobby that smelled like copier toner and fresh carpet glue. I noticed the carpet first. Occupational habit. Cheap broadloom. Badly stretched near the elevators. Laura noticed me looking down. Please don't estimate their flooring while we're here. I already did. Harold sat at the far end of a small conference room beside his lawyer, Martin Hale, a narrow man with silver glasses and a yellow legal pad covered in tiny handwriting. Harold did not offer his hand. Martin spoke first. My client is not waiving confidentiality. We are providing a limited seller declaration and allowing counsel to review authenticated communications where Mr. Vance was sender or recipient. The purpose is to establish that certain revenue concentration information was disclosed to the buyer. Laura nodded. Understood. Martin turned one page. May 26th. The date landed harder than I expected. He slid a redacted copy toward Laura, who read it before passing it to me. The hotel chain had sent written notice that it would not renew its regional flooring services agreement when the current term expired. May 26th. Nathan came to my kitchen, asking for my signature on June 2nd. Closing happened June 8th. I ran my thumb along the edge of the copy. How much of Vance's revenue was tied to them? I asked. Harold answered this time. Depends on the year. Last full year, just under 2/5. And you disclosed this to Nathan? Harold looked at his lawyer. Martin said, the authenticated communication reflects that the buyer acknowledged receipt. Laura passed me another page. Nathan's name sat at the top of the reply. We've accounted for the transition. Claire was copied. My name appeared nowhere. I read the sentence until the words stopped looking like English. Harold leaned back. I told him losing that account changed the risk. Did you tell him it changed the price? Martin raised a hand. We are not discussing negotiation strategy beyond what is in these limited records. Harold's jaw worked once, but he stayed quiet. Another communication followed. This one came from Harold. Has your guarantor reviewed the customer concentration issue? Below it was Nathan's response. He's comfortable with it. I put the paper down. No, nobody spoke. I looked at Laura. I never saw the notice. I never saw that email. Nathan never used the phrase, customer concentration with me. Martin adjusted his glasses. For clarity, we are not stating what you personally knew. We are establishing what the buyer represented to the seller. That's enough, Laura said. It was not enough for me. Not yet. Harold, when you asked whether I had reviewed it, why did you care? His eyes shifted to Martin again. The lawyer gave a small nod. Because your guarantee mattered to the financing, Harold said. And because I didn't want anybody claiming later that I hid the risk. There it was. The seller had worried about being blamed. Nathan had answered for me. On the drive back, Laura kept both hands on the wheel and the papers in a sealed folder between us. You need to hear something you're not going to like, she said. I've had a full week of practice. Nathan lied about your review. That matters. But you still signed the guarantee. I know. Do you? I turned toward her. Laura kept her eyes on traffic. You had a summary showing a customer worth close to 2/5 of revenue. You knew concentration existed, even if you did not know the customer was leaving. I asked Nathan about it. And then you accepted his answer. The tires hissed over a patch of wet pavement from a sprinkler truck. I stared through the windshield. She was right. I had spent decades telling young estimators not to trust a subcontractor's promise when a written confirmation was available. Then my son sat at my kitchen table and said the account was solid, and I let family replace procedure. That part belonged to me. My phone rang from an unfamiliar number as Laura turned into the parking lot outside my workshop. I answered. Dad. Nathan. His voice was tight, stripped of the easy charm he usually carried into a room. You blocked me, I said. I needed space. You needed a different phone number. You're calling Harold Vance now? I called him once. You have no right digging through private business information. I didn't dig through your accounts. My attorney spoke to Harold's attorney. Nathan breathed out sharply. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You can't stand not being in control. Laura was still in the driver's seat. She looked at me once, then away. I said, Did you know the hotel chain wasn't renewing before I signed? A pause. You signed the guarantee. That wasn't my question. You saw the revenue concentration. I saw historical revenue. You had the packet. Did you know? Nathan's voice dropped. Don't pretend you were a child at the table, Dad. You signed your name. The words hit because part of them were true. He knew it. That was why he used them, I said. You told Harold I had reviewed the risk. Nathan went quiet. Then, be careful what you accuse me of. I'm reading what you wrote. You're reading pieces of a deal you weren't running. You told him I was comfortable with something I had never seen. Another breath. This is why I blocked you. No. You wrote that before you blocked me. Silence. Then the call ended. Laura opened her door. Well, she said. He didn't answer the question. He answered enough. Don't overstate it. I almost smiled. She was relentless about that. Inside the workshop, Susan called before I had finished making coffee. My younger sister rarely called during work hours. She preferred texts with too many commas and no punctuation where it mattered. Ed, she said, what is going on with you and Nathan? What did he tell you? He says you're trying to unwind the company because he won't let you run it. I set the mug down. Did he say why the bank called me? No. He said you panicked. Susan hesitated. You have to admit, you've done this before. Done what? Stepped in when Nathan was trying to make his own decisions. I knew exactly what she meant. Years earlier, Nathan had wanted to take a warehouse job with a friend's startup. I had called the friend's father and asked questions Nathan thought were none of my business. He did not take the job. For 2 years, he reminded me. I was wrong to go around him then, I said. Susan softened slightly. That's all I'm saying. No. That's not all you're saying. I'm saying maybe give him room. I looked at the copied email on my table. He's comfortable with it. Susan, if Nathan told somebody you approved something you had never seen, would you call that room? She did not answer. When the call ended, Laura arrived with the authenticated copies Martin had released for our file and a preservation letter ready for seller counsel and lender counsel. She placed the documents beside my purchase summary. Now we have something clean, she said. The customer gave notice before closing. Buyer acknowledged it. Nathan represented that you had reviewed the risk. And Claire knew. She was copied. That establishes receipt to the address used. Don't turn it into proof of what she thought. I nodded. Laura tapped the purchase price. $1,100,000. I looked at the number. The company had lost a customer responsible for nearly 2/5 of its historical revenue before the deal closed. Yet the acquisition still went through at the price Nathan had shown me. Laura drew one slow line beneath the figure. If they knew that revenue was leaving, she said, the purchase price makes less sense, not more. For the first time, I stopped asking why Nathan had hidden the bad news. I started asking why he had wanted the business badly enough to buy it anyway. The purchase price made less sense the longer I looked at it. Laura spread the closing statement across my workshop table, while the ceiling fan pushed warm air from one end of the room to the other. Paper edges lifted and settled. Outside, a delivery truck groaned through the industrial park, then faded behind the building. $1,100,000, she said. That is not the part I care about yet. She tapped the use of proceeds section. Equipment. Goodwill. Transition services. Consulting. I leaned closer. What is that? Laura followed my finger. A 6-figure allocation sat under equipment transition services, but the summary packet I had received before signing did not clearly identify the final recipient. That's a question, Laura said. Not an answer. I'm getting tired of those. You hired the wrong profession. She had requested only the lender-side documents tied to my exposure and the closing materials I had already been entitled to receive. No fishing expedition. No access to Nathan's operating account. Laura kept reminding me of that line because she knew how badly I wanted to cross it. I pulled my old laptop closer and opened Missouri's Public Business Registry. The entity name from the allocation appeared after a few searches. CNL Advisory LLC, formed before closing. Registered in Missouri. The organizer's information led to Claire. For several seconds, all I heard was the fan clicking overhead. Laura looked at the screen. Public record? Yes. Print it. I did. Does this prove anything? I asked. It proves Claire controls an LLC connected to an entity receiving money from the transaction. That's all. What does a flooring company need her advisory company for? That is a better question. I stared at Claire's name. The formation date made me pause too. It was not proof of anything. Laura said that twice. Plenty of people form LLCs before a purchase closes for perfectly ordinary reasons. Still, CNL had existed early enough to appear in planning documents before money moved. I flipped back to the use of proceeds page. Beside the equipment transition line sat a short vendor code I had ignored the first time. 3 letters and 2 words of description. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that would have stopped me at the kitchen table. Now I circled it in pencil. Laura watched me. Don't decide what it means yet. I'm not. You're pressing hard enough to tear the paper. I loosened my grip. For 30 years, I had taught estimators to separate what they knew from what they assumed. A vendor code was not a confession. Claire owning an LLC was not theft. A high fee was not fraud. But all 3 belonged on the same page now. That was new. A week earlier, she had told me Nathan needed space. The children should not be dragged into conflict. She had sounded like the reasonable person in the room. Now her company sat inside the closing structure. I called her before Laura could tell me not to. Claire answered on the 4th ring. Ed? No, hello, I said. What is CNL Advisory? A chair scraped on her end. Where did you get that name? Public filing. Silence. Then Claire said, It's a bookkeeping entity. For what? Separation. Separation from what? Business functions, taxes, administration, things you don't need to be involved in. I looked at Laura. She shook her head once, not because Claire was lying, but because I was drifting toward an argument. I kept my voice flat. There's a 6-figure allocation tied to equipment transition services. What service did CNL provide? Claire exhaled. Ask Nathan. You own the company. That doesn't mean I made every decision. There it was. Not a denial. A handoff. I said, Did CNL receive money from the acquisition? You need to stop treating every family decision like a deposition. I asked a yes or no question, and I said, Talk to your son. The call ended. Laura took the phone from my hand and placed it face down on the table. Useful, she said. Because she dodged? Because she didn't deny the LLC. Don't turn that into more than it is. I nodded, but my eyes stayed on Claire's name. By Friday, I had convinced myself the next conversation would be different, because it had nothing to do with lawyers or banks. Owen was turning 9. I had bought him a beginner's telescope 3 weeks earlier, before any of this started. He had spent half of spring asking me whether Saturn's rings looked real through a backyard scope. The box sat on the passenger seat as I drove to Nathan's house. I had not been invited. That should have stopped me. It didn't. Cars lined the curb. Children's voices leaked through the front windows, mixed with the thump of music and the occasional burst of laughter. The front porch smelled faintly of charcoal from someone's grill next door. I carried the box to the door and rang the bell. Claire opened it only halfway. Her face changed when she saw me. Ed, I brought Owen his gift. You can't be here. Behind her, I heard Lily shriek with laughter. My fingers tightened around the cardboard handle. I'm not here to talk business. Today is not a good day. It's his birthday. I know what day it is. Nathan appeared in the hallway behind her. He stepped forward but did not open the door wider. Dad, go home. I looked past him. A blue balloon bounced against the ceiling. Owen ran across the living room in socks, chasing another boy. He never saw me. I held up the box. I'm leaving this. Nathan's jaw moved. You need to stop showing up. I'm standing on your porch with a birthday present. Our lawyers told us to limit contact. My lawyer told me not to argue with you. She didn't tell me I couldn't see my grandson. Claire's voice dropped. Please don't do this here. Nathan came closer. You signed papers you didn't understand, he said. Don't turn that into my crime. The sentence was quiet. That made it worse. I looked at him for a long second. You told Harold I had reviewed a risk I had never seen. Nathan's face hardened. Not today. No. You're right. I set the telescope beside the door, Owen's voice came from deeper in the house. Mom, where's the cake knife? Claire looked over her shoulder. When she looked back, I was already walking down the steps. The door closed behind me. Not slammed, just closed. I sat in my truck with both hands on the steering wheel and watched a paper plate roll across Nathan's lawn in the breeze. My phone was in the cup holder. Susan's name sat near the top of my contacts. I could call her, tell her about the non-renewal notice, the false statement, Claire's LLC. Ask her to talk to Nathan. Ask her to tell the family I wasn't losing my mind. My thumb hovered over her name. Then I locked the phone. No, I had spent too many years believing family testimony counted as evidence just because it came from someone who loved you. Not this time. Back at the workshop, Laura had sent an email marked urgent. Lender counsel confirmed preservation. Portal audit history. Document versions. Upload and deletion events. The records would be held. I called her. So, they can't erase the trail? They can still do foolish things, Laura said. But preserved lender records won't disappear because someone deletes a file later. A small win. The first one I could touch. I leaned against the table and looked at the copy of CNL's public filing. Claire had moved from the edge of the story into the paperwork. That mattered. The next afternoon, Laura called again. Her tone had changed. Ed, lender counsel found something during preservation review. I stopped sorting old invoices. What? A document used to support a use of proceeds request. I don't have the authenticated copy yet. I requested it through counsel. What kind of document? An equipment invoice. The word pulled me upright. Vendor? She gave me the name. For a second, I thought I had misheard her. Say that again. Laura repeated it. I knew that supplier. I had bought grinders and dust control equipment from them years earlier. Then the owner retired. The company closed. Not last month. Not recently. More than a year ago. I looked at the date written on my legal pad. The invoice Laura had just described was supposedly issued after a company I knew no longer existed had already shut its doors. Don't call the supplier, Laura said before I could reach for my phone. I looked at the invoice copy on her tablet. I know the owner. You knew the owner. We verify first. The authenticated copy had arrived from lender counsel that morning. The vendor name was Plains Industrial Surface Systems, a company I had bought equipment from for years. The invoice claimed Plains sold grinders, vacuums, and dust control units to Lawson Premier Floors after Nathan's acquisition closed. I knew something else. Plains had shut down 14 months earlier. Laura opened Missouri's public business records. The dissolution date matched my memory. That proves the company dissolved, she said. It does not prove this invoice was fabricated by Nathan, Claire, or anyone else. I know. You keep saying that like you want a medal. I pointed at the invoice number. That format is wrong. Laura looked up. Plains used the year, then a job sequence. Always. This is just a 6-digit number. Can you prove that? Not from memory. Good answer. She contacted the former owner through his attorney, not through me. His name was Dennis Crowley. 2 days later, with counsel's permission, Dennis joined a conference call. His voice sounded older than I remembered. Ed Lawson, he said. Still arguing about floor grinders? Only the imaginary ones now. Dennis laughed once. Then Laura took over. She asked him to identify the old company, confirm the dissolution, and review the invoice lender counsel had produced. Paper rustled through the speaker. Dennis went quiet. That's not ours, Laura asked. What tells you that? Numbering is wrong. Logo is an older version. We stopped using that address before we closed, and we never sold that package. Could another entity have acquired your name or invoice system? No. Did Plains issue invoices after dissolution? No. I stared at the document. Laura asked the question I had been waiting for. Can you tell us who created this invoice? Dennis answered immediately. No. That mattered. A false invoice existed. We still did not know who made it. After the call, Laura marked 3 points on her pad. Dissolution. Template mismatch. Equipment package never sold. Now, it's evidence that the invoice did not originate from the named supplier, she said. Not evidence of authorship. I leaned back. Somebody used it to support a request for loan money. Yes. And that? Somebody expected nobody to call a dead company. Dissolved company, Laura corrected. Lawyers ruin every good sentence. Occupational hazard. By then, Nathan had stopped trying to reach me privately. He had found a larger room. Susan called that evening. Ed, Nathan says you're telling the bank he forged invoices. I haven't told the bank Nathan forged anything. He says you're trying to get the loan called. I'm trying to find out why a dissolved supplier appears on paperwork supporting the loan. Susan went silent. I could hear a television behind her. Is that true? She asked. The supplier closed more than a year ago. And Nathan knows you found it? I don't know what Nathan knows. That's not what he told everybody. My phone buzzed while she was still speaking. The family group chat. Nathan had posted a long message. Dad is contacting former vendors and trying to create a fraud narrative because I won't let him control the company. He reviewed financial information before signing. I'm asking everyone not to feed this. Below it, Claire added one sentence. Please remember, there are children involved. I read both messages twice. Nathan had moved from telling the family I was panicking to telling them I was manufacturing fraud. The story was hardening. Susan said, maybe you should answer him. No. Then everyone hears his side. They already are. Ed. I looked at the false invoice. I'm done arguing facts in a family chat. I ended the call. Before Peter arrived, I went through my sent folder without opening anything that looked unfamiliar. Laura stayed beside me. Search only, she said. No forwarding. No deleting. The disputed message did not appear. That proved less than I wanted. A sent item could be removed. A mailbox could be accessed from another device. A copied email could be manufactured outside the account entirely. Still, its absence mattered enough for Laura to write down. I also found the ordinary messages I had sent Nathan that week. One asked whether the closing time had changed. Another reminded him to confirm insurance coverage before crews started under the new ownership. Short sentences, plain words. Nothing about vendors. Nothing about equipment. Nothing that sounded like the polished sentence now carrying my name. Laura printed the search results and said, "These are comparison material, not a verdict." Every time I wanted a door to slam shut, she left it open an inch. I was beginning to understand why. The next morning, Laura brought in a forensic consultant named Peter Sloan. He wore no tie and carried a laptop covered with old adhesive marks where stickers had been peeled away. I handed him the security alert I had printed from my desktop. This came in while Nathan was at my house. Peter read it. What do you want this to prove? That someone signed into my email from a new device. It proves the provider generated an alert associated with a new sign-in event. That's not the same thing as proving who touched the device. Laura gave me a look that said she had already told me so. Peter continued. Do you still have the desktop? Yes. Router? Yes. Have you reset or replaced it? No. Good. Don't start clicking through logs. Let me preserve what's available. He came to the workshop that afternoon. The old desktop sat beneath a layer of dust on the side desk. Nathan had laughed at it the week before closing. You're making this painful to watch. I remembered leaving him there while I went for coffee. Peter photographed the setup, documented the router model, and created copies of what could be preserved without altering the originals. He found the security notice in the mailbox. He found a local browser history entry from the same afternoon. Then he stopped. What? I asked. Nothing conclusive. Meaning? Meaning I can tell you there was activity. I cannot tell you Nathan performed it. If this matters later, we need provider-side session data, headers from any disputed email, and something independent that links a device to him. Can Laura get that? Sometimes, through proper requests, depending on what still exists. Laura folded her arms. No magic computer clue, Ed. I wasn't asking for magic. Peter looked at my desktop. Good. Magic has terrible chain of custody. For the first time that day, I laughed. It lasted about 2 seconds. Laura's phone rang. She stepped outside. When she returned, her face had changed. Lender counsel received another document from borrower side counsel. Nathan's lawyer had finally responded to preservation notices and disputed role questions. Laura placed a printed email on the table. The sender line showed my email address. The message was dated after closing. The text approved an equipment vendor change and referenced the same modernization category tied to the false planes invoice. At the bottom was my name, Edward Lawson. I read it once, then again. I never sent this. Laura said nothing. I didn't write it. I heard you. I never approved a vendor change. Peter moved closer but did not touch the page. Do we have original headers? Not yet, Laura said. I've requested the native message and metadata. I pointed at a sentence in the body. Proceed with the alternate supplier as discussed. That isn't how I write, Laura said. Style is not proof. I know what proof is. My voice came out sharper than I intended. She waited. I lowered it. I know. The email changed the shape of the problem. Until then, Nathan's story depended on saying I had reviewed risk and interfered with decisions. Now there was a document that appeared to show me doing exactly that. If it was genuine, I had forgotten something enormous. If it was not, somebody had gone beyond describing me as controlling. They had started leaving my fingerprints on the paperwork. I walked to the old desktop. The black case was scratched along one side. A strip of masking tape still covered a dead USB port. Nathan had sat in that chair, using this machine, while I stood 10 feet away making coffee. Peter closed his laptop. Don't decide yet, Laura ordered. We verified. I looked back at the email with my name beneath words I had never written. For the first time, the question was no longer whether Nathan had lied before me. It was whether someone had been preparing documents that could make his lie look true. Nathan's warning sat in front of me for less than 24 hours before Claire sent her own. The text came from a number I did not recognize. Nathan doesn't know I'm contacting you. A second message followed before I could answer. Coffee shop on 75th. Noon. Come alone. I showed both messages to Laura. Do you want to go? She asked. Yes. Then I'm going too, she said alone. Laura zipped her briefcase. She can be disappointed. The coffee shop sat between a dry cleaner and a pet supply store, far enough from Nathan's house that Claire had clearly chosen it for privacy. The grinder behind the counter screamed every few minutes. Burnt espresso hung in the air, mixed with vanilla syrup and wet cardboard from a stack of delivery boxes near the back door. Claire was already seated in the corner. No makeup. Hair pulled back. Both hands around a paper cup she had not touched. When she saw Laura behind me, her mouth tightened. I said alone. I don't do secret meetings without counsel anymore, I said. Claire looked at Laura. Are you recording this? Laura sat beside me. No. Taking notes? I'm a lawyer. Claire let go of the cup. For a few seconds, none of us spoke. Then she said, Nathan knew. I kept my hands on the table. Knew what? That the hotel account was leaving. Laura did not move. Claire continued. He knew before closing. We both did. The last 3 words landed differently. Not he did. We did, I asked. Then why buy the company? Claire stared past me toward the front window. Nathan said the contracts still had value. Crews, equipment, customer lists. He said if we moved fast enough, we could pull enough value out before cash flow got bad. Pull value out how? He handled that side. You handled the books. Her eyes came back to mine. I entered what he told me to enter. That sounded rehearsed. Laura heard it too. She asked, Did you create CNL Advisory? Yes. What services did it provide? Bookkeeping, transition work, administrative setup. For more than $100,000? Claire rubbed her thumb along the cup seam. It wasn't all mine. What does that mean? I asked. It means Nathan moved money where he wanted it moved. She reached into her purse. My shoulders stiffened before I saw what she was holding. A black USB drive. Claire placed it between us. There are invoices on there, internal spreadsheets, screenshots of texts, transfers. Laura did not touch it. Claire looked at me instead. You want to know what your son thought of your guarantee? Read the messages. What messages? One where he says you'll cover the gap if things get ugly. The coffee grinder started again. For years, I had heard Nathan call me when a furnace failed, when a truck needed repairs, when a tax bill arrived higher than expected. Small things, then bigger ones. Just this once, Dad. The phrase had changed clothes over the years, but it always came home to the same door. I looked at the USB. Why give this to me? Claire's answer came quickly. Because Nathan is trying to put everything on you. And you? I'm trying to protect my children. That wasn't my question. Her fingers tightened around the paper cup. I made mistakes. Which ones? I did bookkeeping for my husband. Laura finally spoke. That is not an answer either. Claire looked at her, then back at me. Nathan made the decisions. There it was again, a clean line drawn around herself. I pushed the USB back an inch. If I take this, I'm giving it to Laura. Claire's eyes narrowed. You can't take it to the bank. I didn't say I would. You cannot hand them everything without context. Whose context? Mine. She leaned forward. I came here because Nathan will burn everybody before he admits what he did. I'm giving you what you need. I'm asking you not to drag me down with him. The words were soft. The bargain was not. Laura said, if you're providing potentially relevant records, we're not promising immunity, secrecy, or favorable treatment. Claire gave a bitter little laugh. I'm not asking for immunity. You just asked him to keep you out of it. Claire stood. Forget it. I put my hand over the USB before she could take it back. No. Her eyes dropped to my hand. I'll take it. She sat again. But I'm not promising you anything. For the first time since we arrived, her face lost some of its control. Ed, think about Owen and Lily. I am. Then don't destroy their mother because Nathan used me. I slipped the USB into the small evidence envelope Laura took from her briefcase. I'm not destroying anybody. Claire looked at me. No, not rescuing you isn't the same thing. She left her coffee untouched and walked out. Back at Laura's office, I did not plug the USB into anything. Before Peter opened the copied drive, Laura asked me to write down everything Claire had said while it was still fresh. Not what I thought she meant. Her words. That exercise took longer than I expected. Nathan knew. We both did. He handled that side. I entered what he told me to enter. Nathan made the decisions. I stared at the page. Every sentence pushed responsibility away from Claire, while still giving me enough to use against Nathan. Laura read over my shoulder. She may be telling the truth. I know. She may also be telling the truth selectively. I know that too. Good. I folded the page and set it beside the evidence envelope. The strange thing was how badly I wanted Claire's version to be clean. If one person finally stepped out of Nathan's side and handed me the truth, the whole mess would become easier to understand. But easy had already cost me once. Peter Sloan came in that afternoon. He photographed the drive, wrote down its markings, sealed the original, then created a forensic copy with a recorded hash before opening the duplicate. The first files looked real enough. Invoices, spreadsheets, screenshots, a transfer list. One screenshot showed Nathan's name above a text conversation. Dad will cover the gap if things get ugly. He always does. I read it twice. Peter raised a finger. Screenshot is not the same as native message data. I know. Laura glanced at me. You're learning. Another spreadsheet listed money moving through CNL. The totals almost matched the closing allocation. Almost. Peter scrolled slowly. Something was edited recently. Laura leaned closer. How recently? Within the last few days, assuming the file timestamps are reliable. I'll verify. I looked at the chair Claire had occupied in my mind all afternoon. Bookkeeper following orders. Mother protecting children. Woman turning on a husband who had used her. Maybe some of that was true. Maybe all of it was. That was the problem. My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Dad. Nathan again. What number is this? Doesn't matter. His voice sounded different, not calmer, smaller. Has Claire contacted you? I looked at Laura. She shook her head once. I said, why? Nathan took too long. Because she's not who you think she is. I haven't told you what I think. Whatever she gave you, don't trust it. That caught me. Not if she gave you something. Whatever she gave you, I asked. Why would Claire give me anything? Nathan's breathing changed. Then his voice hardened. You want to believe I'm the bad guy because that makes this easy. You blocked me and told the family not to listen to me. And you ran to lawyers. You had a draft blaming me 2 days after closing. Silence. I waited. Nathan said, Claire handles documents. Then he hung up. Laura stared at my phone. They're separating their stories. Peter kept working. A few minutes later, he stopped scrolling. I found the problem. He turned the laptop toward us. One spreadsheet row had been deleted from the version Claire handed over. Peter had recovered enough of the underlying file structure to show the line. A transfer amount. An account code. No recipient name. Laura compared it with the total Claire had described at the coffee shop. The numbers differed by exactly that amount. I read the code aloud. It meant nothing to me. Peter said, I can tell you the row was removed. I can't tell you yet where the money went. Claire had not brought me a confession. She had brought me a version. And somewhere behind the row she deleted, money had gone to a third place she did not want me to see. The account code Claire deleted turned out to belong to Nathan. Not his name exactly. That would have been too simple. Laura got the answer through records produced in the civil dispute, matched against lender transaction data that had already been preserved. The code pointed to an entity Nathan controlled separately from C&L Advisory. Claire was not listed as an owner. Laura set the production copy on my workshop table. Read the ownership line. I did. Nathan Lawson. My chair creaked as I leaned back. So Claire moved money into C&L, and some of it moved again. That is what the records show. To him, to an entity he controls. Without Claire, we do not know what Claire knew. There it was again. The inch of daylight Laura always left between a fact and the story I wanted to build around it. Still, the transfer dates were hard to ignore. Money had entered C&L after closing. Then a portion moved out through a route that ended under Nathan's control. Not company payroll. Not an operating expense. Not something the original summary packet had described to me. I rubbed the side of my thumb against the paper. How much? Laura pointed. Enough that my mouth went dry. Not enough to explain the entire deal. Enough to explain why someone might lie to a spouse. For days I had been asking whether Claire was protecting Nathan or whether Nathan was hiding behind Claire's paperwork. Now there was a third possibility. They had been working together and stealing from each other at the same time. Laura must have seen where my mind went. Do not call either of them. I wasn't going to. You always say that right before you call somebody. This time I listened. She sent formal questions through counsel about C&L's records, the deleted spreadsheet row, and the transfer route. Claire called me before her lawyer answered. Her voice was low and fast. You said you were trying to protect yourself. I am. You're tearing apart my family. I looked at the speakerphone on the table. Laura sat across from me, saying nothing. You brought me a USB with a deleted transfer row, I said. I gave you what I had. You gave me what you wanted me to see. Claire's breathing sharpened. You think Nathan is innocent now? I didn't say that. You have no idea what he's done. Then let the records show it. A cabinet door slammed somewhere on her end. Claire lowered her voice. You are his father. I know. My children are watching their dad leave the house because you won't stop. That was the first time she said it plainly. Leave the house? She went silent. Claire, this is exactly why I shouldn't have called. You said Nathan left? I'm done. The line cut. Laura reached for her coffee. Do not chase that. I'm sitting down. Miracles happen. 2 days later, Susan confirmed what Claire had let slip. Nathan was staying at a hotel near the interstate. My sister called after dinner, speaking in the careful voice people use when they have decided they are delivering neutral information while carrying a bucket of gasoline. Claire says he lost his mind over money. What does Nathan say? Susan hesitated. That she messed with the books. I closed my eyes. There it was. The marriage that had presented one clean story to the family was splitting into two. Did either of them show you anything? I asked. No. Then don't pick one. Ed. I'm not picking anybody. You called me. Susan exhaled. You always have to make everything sound like testimony. No. I'm trying not to make family gossip into evidence. She went quiet. Then she said, Nathan told me Claire handled the vendor setup. Claire told me Nathan controlled the decisions. Well, somebody is lying. Probably more than one somebody. Susan did not answer that. Neither did I. By then, Harold's counsel had produced additional purchase materials through the formal request Laura had made. No secret midnight document. No convenient confession. Just pages that had existed before any of us started fighting. The purchase agreement included a side consulting arrangement tied to transition work. Another allocation covered equipment-related value. Put together, the structure allowed substantial cash to leave the acquired company soon after closing. Harold's lawyer was careful. These were disclosed transaction components, his letter said. Our client makes no representation regarding the buyer's later use of funds. Laura read the sentence aloud. Translation: Harold is protecting Harold. Can't blame him. No. We laid the new documents beside the lender closing statement. The overpayment question changed. Maybe Nathan had not bought an overpriced company because he was overly optimistic. Maybe the price and structure mattered because they created places for money to move. I traced the sequence with my pencil. Known customer loss. Closing anyway. Consulting allocation. Equipment allocation. CNL. Transfer out of CNL. Borrower draft. Assigning decisions to me. Then the email supposedly showing my approval. The paper trail was no longer a pile. It had direction. Laura watched me draw arrows. Careful. I'm not labeling authors. Good. I'm labeling timing. That she allowed. The easiest move would have been to use the split between them. Push Claire harder. Hint to Nathan that she had already handed me files. Let each one panic and hope somebody made a mistake. Laura shut that idea down before I said it aloud. Do not become part of their negotiation, she said. I wasn't planning to. You were looking at the phone. That proves nothing. Now you sound like me. She slid the transfer records back into the folder. If Claire is trying to save herself, she will shade facts. If Nathan is trying to save himself, he will do the same. You do not need either one to be honest if the records are independent. That landed. For weeks I had wanted one of them to crack and tell me what happened. Now that their marriage was cracking, I understood how dangerous that wish had been. A confession from either side would come wrapped in self-preservation. Better to let their stories collide with documents they could not rewrite after the fact. So I stopped waiting for the phone to ring and went back to the dates. Nathan called that night. His voice sounded rough. You happy? I was standing alone in the workshop with the lights off except for the desk lamp. No. Claire's trying to bury me. I'm not your marriage counselor. She changed records. So did someone else. His silence stretched. I continued. Money left CNL and went to an entity you control. That was repayment. For what? Money I put into the deal. Show it. I don't owe you an explanation. You owe somebody one. Nathan's laugh had no humor in it. She told you I stole from her, didn't she? Claire didn't tell me where the money went. That stopped him. He asked, Then how do you know? Records. Another silence. Nathan's voice dropped. You think paper knows everything? No. Good. The line went dead. I stared at the phone. That sentence bothered me more than if he had cursed. You think paper knows everything? It sounded less like a defense than a warning. The next morning, Laura brought a preserved version history from lender counsel. She did not sit down. Remember the vendor code you circled in the use of proceeds schedule? I pulled the page from my file. 3 letters. 2 words. Small enough that I had nearly ignored it. Laura placed another sheet beside it. This is not the full content authentication yet. Peter still needs to verify the version history and metadata. But Lender Council has a preserved record showing a related vendor schedule version existed on May 30th. I looked at the date. May 30th. Nathan came to my kitchen on June 2nd. 3 days later. My pencil stopped above the page. What was in the early version? CNL appears by name. The same vendor code appears too. Nothing else in the room moved. Not the fan, not my hand, not even the page. Laura kept talking, but slower now. Do not jump ahead. We still need full authentication of the version and contents. I barely heard her. May 30th. Before Nathan sat across from me. Before he slid the pen over. Before he said he did not need my money. Only my signature. The route may have already been on paper before he ever asked me to join the deal. May 30th sat on the page like a nail. Peter verified it 2 days later. He came to Laura's office with a printed report, a laptop, and the same habit of refusing to sound impressed by anything. The preserved lender-side version history showed a vendor schedule created on May 30th. CNL advisory appeared by name. So did the vendor code that later showed up beside disputed payments. Before Nathan asked for my signature. Before the closing. Before any of the trouble he claimed I created. Peter turned the laptop toward me. The version existed on the lender system before June 2nd. That part is clean. And the contents? Preserved. Same file family. Same vendor references. Laura tapped the page. This does not prove who typed every line. I know. It proves the root existed before Nathan asked you to guarantee the loan. That was enough to change the memory. I could see my kitchen table again. Nathan's blue pen rolling between his fingers. The way he had said, "Dad, I don't need your money, just your signature." At the time, the sentence sounded like pride. Now it sounded rehearsed. I had believed the business plan came first, and my guarantee came later. The dates suggested something else. My guarantee may have been part of the plan before I was ever invited into it. Laura, let me sit with that for a minute. Then she slid another envelope across the table. Nathan's counsel responded. I opened it. The first paragraph was careful. The second was worse. According to Nathan, I had advised pricing, vendors, equipment purchases, and post-closing allocation decisions. He described me as an experienced flooring executive whose involvement had been expected from the beginning. That's false. Not all of it, Laura said. I looked up. She pulled out a spreadsheet. I recognized it. 3 weeks before closing, Nathan had emailed me a rough cost estimate for equipment replacement. I had corrected 2 prices and changed the expected life on a floor grinder. My initials sat in a comment box. I remembered doing it while eating lunch at the workshop. Nathan had written, "Can you sanity check these numbers?" I had answered, "Your grinder estimate is too high. Vacuum package is light. Call me if you want real vendor ranges." Laura pointed to the comments. "This is the problem." I gave him advice. Yes, I didn't approve vendors. I know. I didn't direct payments. I know. But he can show this and say I was involved. Yes. The word stayed between us. There was also a statement from a former estimator who remembered seeing me at the shop. According to him, I had stood beside the equipment cage and said the seller's replacement numbers were too rich. True. I remembered the exact conversation. Nathan had pointed at a scarred floor scraper and asked whether I would pay the listed value. I told him I wouldn't pay half of it without service records. That sentence now appeared in Nathan's packet as proof that I had participated in acquisition pricing. Another line said I had suggested using established industry contacts for replacement equipment. Also true. I had given Nathan 3 vendor names when he asked whom I trusted. What the statement did not say was that I never opened an account, negotiated a purchase, approved an invoice, or told anybody where loan money should go. Small truths. Useful ones. Nathan did not need to invent every part of his story. He only needed to stretch the parts I had actually lived through until they covered the rest. For weeks I had wanted every fact to line up in one direction. It didn't. I had advised my son. I had visited Vance Commercial Flooring before closing. I had walked the equipment area with him and told him one grinder was near the end of its useful life. I had told him a used dust extractor was worth less than the seller's schedule showed. Fatherly advice. Industry advice. Real advice. Nathan's lawyer was taking those true pieces and building a larger shape around them. Laura said, "A frame works best when it hangs on a real nail." I folded the spreadsheet. So how do we separate what I did from what they're saying I did? With timing. Scope. Independent records. That afternoon, one of those records finally came from Maria Chen. Her name had appeared weeks earlier on the preserved employee list. Operations coordinator, vendor setup, purchase orders. I remembered meeting her once at the business before closing. A woman in her 40s who moved through the office with a headset on and 3 conversations going at once. Laura did not call her casually. Maria's statement came through the formal process, with company records preserved around it. She remembered my visit. Mr. Lawson looked at the equipment list, Maria said during the recorded interview. Nathan asked him what he thought some machines were worth. Laura asked, "Did Mr. Lawson select vendors?" "No." "Did he tell you to create vendor accounts?" "No." "Did he approve payments?" "No." Maria paused. "He complained about the price of a grinder." I almost laughed. "That sounded like me," Laura continued. "Who sent the vendor schedule used for post-closing setup?" Maria answered, "Buyer-side administration." "Can you be more specific?" I received the final setup email from Claire's business address, but Nathan was copied and had already discussed the vendor list with me. My shoulders tightened. Laura asked, "Was Edward Lawson copied?" "No." Maria had one more thing. An internal email. Not a printout she found in a drawer. Not something she suddenly remembered after months. It had remained in the company mailbox and was included in preserved data. The message was dated after my equipment comments, but before closing. Nathan told Maria to use the buyer-side vendor schedule for setup and wrote that any changes should go through him or Claire. My name was nowhere in the instruction. That did not erase the spreadsheet I had edited. It did something better. It put my involvement where it belonged. Advice on costs, not control over transactions. When the interview ended, Laura closed her notebook. "That helps. More than helps. Do not celebrate yet. You really know how to ruin an afternoon." She almost smiled. Peter arrived before 5 with the next piece. Provider records had finally come through on the disputed email that appeared to approve the alternate supplier. He explained it without jargon. The message header shows a session connected to your account. Provider-side session data records a browser and device identifier. That same identifier appears repeatedly in preserved company portal sessions tied to Nathan's normal access. His laptop? I'm not saying we have the serial number of a laptop in his hand. Of course not, Peter continued. But we have a browser device pattern associated with his company access. On the day the disputed email was sent, that same pattern connected to your email account, Laura asked. Location? Workshop network. I stared at him. Peter nodded. Your router log puts that device pattern on the network during the same window. I remembered the coffee, Nathan at my desktop, the museum joke, me walking out of the room. So he sent it. Peter shook his head. We have correlation. Stronger than before. Multiple independent sources. But I would still say the data is consistent with a device regularly used for Nathan's company access being present on your network and accessing your account. Laura looked at me. That sentence is ugly. It's also safer, Peter said. I understood. The truth did not need decoration. The chronology was doing enough on its own. May 30th, vendor route already drafted. June 2nd, Nathan asked me to sign. June 8th, closing. June 10th, blame draft uploaded. Later, an email from my account appeared to approve a vendor change, and now the data around that email pointed back toward a device pattern tied to Nathan. Laura spread the records across the conference table. For the first time, she said, we have enough to force everyone to tell one story under oath. My phone buzzed before I could answer. Voicemail. Nathan. I put it on speaker. His voice was tired. Dad, if you do this, the kids lose their house. Owen and Lily lose everything because you need to prove a point. A pause, then softer. Think about who you're actually punishing. The message ended. Nobody in the room spoke. I looked down at the date May 30th, then at the device report, then at the voicemail screen with my son's name above it. For weeks, Nathan had told everyone I was trying to control him. Now he was asking me to control the consequences. And he was using my grandchildren as the handle. Nathan and Claire gave their sworn testimony on different days. By the time lender counsel called the settlement conference, both versions were in writing. That mattered. People can adjust a story when they hear the other side. A transcript does not. Laura placed copies of the deposition excerpts into a black binder and carried it into the conference room herself. Before the conference, Laura had made me read the deposition excerpts twice. Nathan had been careful when questioned alone. He rarely said, "I ordered a specific payment." Instead, he used phrases such as, "Dad was involved," "Dad understood the plan," and "I relied on his experience." Each phrase sounded harmless until it was placed beside the documents carrying my name. Claire had chosen the opposite approach. She narrowed her role until she was almost a pair of hands at a keyboard. I entered what Nathan instructed. She had testified. But the LLC was hers. The deleted row was hers. Neither story could survive untouched once both were placed in the same room. Laura had warned me on the drive over. Do not interrupt because a sentence makes you angry. If Nathan exaggerates, let the transcript and records answer him. If Claire minimizes, same rule. What if they lie about me? Then give me the facts once. She glanced over. Once, Ed. That was harder than any estimate I had ever prepared. Nathan sat across from me with his attorney. Claire sat 3 chairs away with separate counsel. She never looked at him. No one shook hands. Lender counsel, a man named Robert Ames, opened the meeting without drama. We are not here to determine criminal liability, he said. We are here to address the loan, disputed representations, use of proceeds, recovery exposure, and whether a workout is possible. Nathan leaned toward his lawyer. Claire stared at the tabletop. Robert continued. Everyone has had an opportunity to produce records. We are going to work from those records. That was the part Nathan could not talk about. His deposition said, I had acted like an experienced operator from the beginning. He claimed I guided vendor strategy, reviewed equipment values, and understood the customer concentration risk. His lawyer slid my old estimate spreadsheet forward. Nathan looked at me. You corrected the equipment numbers yourself. I corrected 2 estimates. You gave me vendor names. I gave you 3 names when you asked who I trusted. You came to the shop. Yes. You told me the equipment schedule was wrong. I told you one grinder was overpriced. Nathan opened his hands. Exactly. Laura did not argue with me. She turned to the next page. Mr. Lawson, in your deposition, you said your father was expected to guide vendor strategy after closing. Correct? Nathan's attorney answered first. The transcript speaks for itself. Laura nodded. It does. Then she placed Maria Chen's reserved internal email beside it. Nathan had told Maria that vendor changes were to go through him or Claire, not me. My name was nowhere on that instruction. Laura looked at Robert. Advice existed. Operational authority did not. Nathan shifted in his chair. That's semantics. No, Laura said. That's scope. Claire's version came next. Her deposition was cleaner first. Nathan negotiated the purchase. Nathan controlled the vendor plan. She entered transactions and handled bookkeeping. Then Laura opened the public record for C&L Advisory, Claire's company. The post-closing transfer sat behind her. Claire's attorney leaned forward. My client has never denied owning C&L. Laura nodded. She testified that C&L performed administrative and transition functions. It did. Then we have the altered spreadsheet delivered to Mr. Lawson on the USB. Claire's eyes moved to Laura. Her attorney said, we dispute the characterization altered. Peter's forensic report answers that without raising its voice. A row tied to a transfer had been deleted from the copy Claire gave me. Metadata showed the edit happened before delivery. Laura did not accuse her of hiding the entire scheme. She only asked, why was that row removed? Claire's attorney touched her arm. Claire answered anyway. Because it wasn't relevant to what Nathan had done. Nathan turned his head. That was the first time either of them looked directly at the other. Robert Ames stopped writing. Laura said, "The transfer went from CNL to an entity Nathan controlled." Claire's jaw tightened. "Yes, and you removed it before giving the file to Ed. I was trying to show him the payments I knew about." Nathan let out a short laugh. "You knew about all of it." Claire faced him. "No, I knew about what you told me." His attorney whispered something. Too late. The room had changed. Laura did not press the argument. She went back to dates. May 26th, the hotel chain gave written notice it would not renew. Nathan acknowledged the disclosure. Harold asked whether I had reviewed the concentration risk. Nathan answered that I was comfortable with it. June 2nd. Nathan asked me to guarantee the loan. May 30th appeared next. Earlier, the preserved vendor schedule already contained CNL and the vendor code. Nathan's attorney objected to the implication. Laura said, "I'm not asking anyone to infer authorship. I'm identifying sequence." June 8th. Closing. Money moved through the allocations. Some went to CNL. A portion later traveled to an entity Nathan controlled. June 10th. The borrower side draft appeared, assigning certain financial decisions to me. Then came the plane's invoice. A dissolved supplier. Wrong numbering. Old address. Equipment, the former owner said. His company never sold. Finally, Laura placed the disputed email on the table. My email address. My name. Approval language, I denied writing. Peter's report connected the session to a browser device pattern repeatedly associated with Nathan's company access, and the workshop router placed that same pattern on my network during the relevant window. Nathan rubbed both palms over his thighs. "This still doesn't prove I typed anything." Laura looked at him. "You're right." His head came up. One clean answer had taken the fight out of his face. Laura continued, "No single item proves the entire scheme. That is why we have the chronology." Robert Ames turned toward Nathan. "Your deposition says your father became involved in vendor decisions after closing." Nathan nodded cautiously. "The schedule existed before he was asked to guarantee the loan," Robert said. Nathan's attorney stepped in. "There can be preliminary schedules." "Of course." Robert looked at Claire. "Your deposition says Nathan controlled vendor decisions." Claire said nothing. Then Nathan snapped. "You gave him the files." Claire's chair moved back half an inch. "You moved money behind my back," his attorney said. "Nathan." Claire leaned forward. "You told me it was reimbursement." "It was." "You said the account was temporary." "It was my money. You used my company to move it." The silence after that was different from every other silence in the room. Nobody needed them to confess to everything. They had just broken each other's cleaner stories. Robert closed his folder. "We will proceed with contractual recovery and workout discussions. The documented irregularities will also be reviewed by Internal Fraud and Compliance Counsel for any appropriate referral." Nathan looked at me. Not Robert. Me. The meeting ended without handcuffs, shouting, or anyone being marched away. Just lawyers collecting paper. That almost made it worse. Nathan caught me in the hallway before Laura reached the elevator. "Dad!" I stopped. His tie was loose. There was gray under his eyes I had not noticed inside. "I'm your son." "I know. I know. If you call this a misunderstanding, we can still contain it." "We?" "Owen and Lily live in that house." There it was again. The handle. "I'll make sure the kids have somewhere safe if they need it." Nathan's shoulders dropped slightly. "Thank you. I didn't say I'd protect you." His face changed. "Dad, I won't lie to the bank. I won't lie under oath. And I won't say I approved things I didn't approve." "You'd let your own son lose everything?" I looked at him. "You already made that decision for both of us." Laura waited until we were inside the elevator. Then she handed me a single page. "What's this?" "Your guarantee." "I've seen it." "Read the limit again." $500,000. My name sat beneath it in my own handwriting. Real signature. Real obligation. Laura said, "Today helped separate your role from theirs. It did not erase what you actually signed. The elevator descended. For the first time in weeks, the truth had finally caught up with Nathan and Claire. But it had caught up with me too. The $500,000 limit stayed on my desk for 3 days. I stopped pretending it was somebody else's number. By then, lender counsel had formally asserted defaults under the loan's representations and use of proceeds provisions, and had made demand under my limited guarantee. Laura disputed what the bank could attribute to me, but not the fact that the guarantee itself was real. We spent those days working through what I had actually signed, what had been attributed to me later, and what the bank was willing to resolve without years of litigation. The guarantee was real. My signature was real. Nathan's lies did not erase either one. That was the part I hated most. Not because it was unfair, because it was fair. I had signed after asking questions, but not enough questions. I had let my son's confidence replace written verification. The bank had relied on my name. And even though the records now separated my role from the false approvals and disputed transactions, the original obligations still belonged to me. Laura slid a settlement proposal across the table. It is less than the full limit. How much less? She told me. The number still made my jaw drop. I can pay it. I know. That doesn't mean I want to. No one said you had to enjoy accountability. I looked at her. You practiced that sentence. For clients like you, the payment would come from liquid investments, not my retirement accounts and not the house I had owned for 31 years. Still, selling part of that portfolio hurt. Those accounts were not abstract money to me. They were years, late estimates, canceled vacations, weekends spent measuring hotel corridors while other families were at baseball games. I signed the settlement. No applause, no victory music, just the scratch of a pen that sounded too much like the first signature at my kitchen table. The lender preserved its right to pursue Nathan, Claire, the company, and recipients tied to disputed transfers. My payment did not buy them forgiveness. It bought me certainty about my own exposure and ended the argument over obligations I had actually accepted. When I walked out of Laura's office, I was poorer, but my name was mine again. Nathan called that evening. I let it ring twice before answering. Dad. His voice was quieter than it had been in weeks. What do you need? He ignored the question. I heard you settled. Yes. So the bank got paid. Partly. That should calm things down. No. Silence. Then he said, you could tell them you don't want to pursue the rest. That isn't my decision. You know what I mean. I did. He wanted me to withdraw cooperation, to soften statements, to turn records into a family misunderstanding. I'm not doing that. Nathan breathed through his nose. Claire is trying to take the house in a separation. The company is bleeding cash. If the lender keeps pushing recovery, there won't be anything left. You should talk to your lawyer. I'm talking to my father. Those used to be different conversations. He went quiet. Then came the line I knew was waiting. What about Owen and Lily? I leaned against the workbench. What about them? They live in that house. If they need help, I will help them. Nathan's voice loosened. Thank you. Directed. Another pause. What does that mean? It means if Owen needs school expenses covered, I pay the school. If Lily needs medical copays, I pay the provider. If they need temporary housing, I deal with the landlord, or whoever is actually providing it. You don't trust me with money. No. He absorbed that. The silence lasted long enough for the fluorescent light above my bench to buzz twice. Nathan said, so this is punishment. No. This is the end of access. You're making me beg. I'm making sure help reaches the children. You used to say, family takes care of family. I still believe that. I looked at the red folder, locked in my cabinet. But I don't believe family means handing you another account. He hung up. 3 months passed before the next pieces settled into place. Not everything ended cleanly. Nothing real does. Lawson Premier Floors lost more work after the hotel contract disappeared. The lender moved forward with recovery against company assets and continued reviewing disputed transfers. Nathan's equity had effectively been wiped out by the company's losses and the recovery claims. The business that was supposed to prove he no longer needed anyone had become a stack of negotiations, claims, and bills he could not charm away. Claire's LLC came under civil tracing and recovery scrutiny. Not every dollar was automatically paid. Laura corrected me the first time I used the word fraud. Only transactions were marked as Lawson to recover. So I stopped using it. Claire and Nathan remained separated. Each had separate counsel. There was no dramatic divorce signed in an afternoon, no judge dividing everything before lunch. Their lawyers were still sorting what belonged to whom, what came from the business, and what might be subject to other claims. The lender also sent the irregularities to its internal fraud and compliance lawyers for review. Laura warned me not to turn that into a prediction. Referral is not a conviction, she said. It may lead to more requests, an investigation, or nothing beyond the civil record. We do not write the ending for them. That was harder to accept than I expected. Part of me wanted a clean punishment, with a date stamped on it. Charges filed. A judge speaking. Something official enough that nobody at Thanksgiving could call the whole thing a family disagreement. But the documents did not need a courtroom to tell me what had happened. Nathan had known the customer was leaving. The money route existed before I signed. Claire had moved money through her LLC and edited what she later handed me. My account had been used in a way that preserved data tied back toward Nathan's normal device pattern. Those facts did not become more true because a prosecutor might someday read them. Susan called less often. When she did, she no longer told me to give Nathan room. One Sunday she said, "I owe you an apology. You don't owe me anything." I believed him. So did I. That ended the conversation faster than either of us expected. Peter eventually closed out his portion of the forensic work with the same caution he had started with. No single electronic record proved everything, but the session data, preserved headers, device pattern, router evidence, and company access records all pointed in the same direction. Enough for the lawyers, enough for the lender, enough that Nathan stopped calling the disputed email a misunderstanding. He started calling it complicated. That word did not save him either. The last time I saw Claire that year was outside Laura's office. She looked thinner. No makeup. No careful bookkeeping voice. She stopped 6 feet away. "Did Nathan tell you I warned him?" "About what?" "The hotel contract." I studied her. "Is that in the records?" Her mouth tightened. "You really are going to make everything a document now?" "No." I opened the office door. "Just the things people keep changing." She walked away. I never got an answer. I did not need one. The records already showed enough. A few weeks later, Nathan came to the workshop. No lawyer. No Claire. No children. He stood beside the old desktop and looked at the dust on the keyboard. "You kept this then. It still works." He gave a tired laugh. "Of course it does." For a while, neither of us spoke. Then Nathan said, "I lost the company. I heard. Claire wants out." I heard that too. He looked toward the locked cabinet. "You happy now?" I shook my head. "No. What was all this for then?" I thought about the question. The bank, the false invoice, the deleted row, the email with my name under words I never wrote. The birthday gift left on a porch. $500,000 of risk reduced to a signature my son thought he could use forever. It was so you couldn't make your choices my responsibility anymore. Nathan looked down. "I'm still your son." "I know." He waited. That sentence used to be enough. Enough for a check. Enough for a phone call. Enough for me to climb into whatever hole he had dug and start shoveling. Not this time. Nathan finally nodded once and walked toward the door. Before leaving, he turned. "If the kids need something, call me." His shoulders eased. I added, "For them." The ease disappeared. He left. The door shut behind him. I stood alone in the workshop, listening to the old fan click every third time. Then I opened the cabinet, put the red folder on the bottom shelf, and locked it. Not because I wanted to remember what Nathan had done, because I wanted to remember what I had finally stopped doing. If you have ever signed something for someone you love because saying no felt colder than taking the risk, You probably understand why Ed kept returning to that kitchen table in his mind. The hardest betrayals are rarely committed by strangers. A stranger does not know which sentence will make you lower your guard. A stranger cannot say, "I'm your son," and make 30 years of memories answer before your judgment does. Family knows where the doors are because you gave them the keys. But there is an important difference between helping someone and becoming responsible for every choice they make. Ed did sign the guarantee. That mattered. He could not erase his own decisions simply because Nathan later lied, hid information, and tried to place false responsibility on him. Accepting that cost was painful. But it also kept Ed from becoming what Nathan accused him of being. He did not escape responsibility. He separated his responsibility from theirs. That distinction may be the most important part of this story. When someone betrays you, anger can make total victory feel like the only acceptable ending. You want every dollar returned, every lie exposed, every relative to apologize, and every person who doubted you to finally admit you were right. Real life is usually messier. Sometimes, justice means you still pay for the mistake that was truly yours while refusing to carry the fraud, manipulation, or consequences that belong to someone else. Would you have signed for Nathan? And once you discovered what he had done, would you have protected him because he was your son? Ed chose something harder than revenge for its own sake. He stopped giving Nathan access to the very thing Nathan had learned to exploit: automatic rescue. He did not abandon Owen and Lily. He drew a line between supporting his grandchildren and financing their father. School expenses could go to the school. Medical costs could go to the provider. Housing help could reach the person providing the housing. Compassion remained. Unrestricted access did not. That is what a boundary looks like when money and family become tangled together. It is not always a slammed door. Sometimes it is a payment made directly, a document requested before a signature, a question asked twice when the first answer feels too easy. And sometimes it is accepting that love does not require you to participate in someone else's deception. Before you rescue someone again, ask yourself one uncomfortable question: am I helping them recover, or am I helping them avoid the consequences that might finally force them to change? Those two acts can look identical when money leaves your hand. Their endings can be completely different. Nathan lost the company he wanted so badly. Claire lost the protection of clean bookkeeping and a united marriage. Ed lost money too, but the most important thing he recovered was control over where his responsibility ended. So if someone you love ever puts a pen in your hand and says, "It's just a signature," remember Ed's kitchen table. The smallest sentence can carry the largest debt, and love is not a substitute for reading what you are agreeing to.